Okay, so Parmjit Nihal here, your friendly neighbourhood anarchist is what I like to call myself. And today I'm talking with Mike Schumann, and it's really exciting because it's the first time me and Mike have got to meet face to face, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, we have spoken before in a group Zoom like this, but this is the first time you and I have spoken one-on-one like this. So
I don't
yeah,
remember speaking in a group Zoom.
yeah, it was a while ago.
Was
Yeah, it
it?
was a while.
Okay, cool,
Yeah, we had
cool.
about. I remember Denise was in on that with
Oh,
us. And,
okay. Maybe it was the World Summit project.
yes, it was. It was a World
Okay,
Summit project.
okay,
Hmm.
cool. So can you just introduce yourself, tell people a bit about your background, where you're coming from? Because we're going
Yeah,
to be talking
absolutely.
about local currencies and the whole question of economics, aren't
Oh,
we?
sure. Sure, absolutely. I've always thought of myself as kind of a business person and also an artist. So I went to business school right out of high school, and
Uh-huh.
I worked at a Morgan Stanley office here in the United States for about 4 or 5 years. So I helped manage the accounts of those who are affluent, and
Okay, so you're
a
not new
little,
to the world of numbers then?
not at all, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, so between business school and working in the investment office, I got to see a lot behind the scenes as well. Um, and a lot of my humanitarian efforts stem around bringing the arts to people, who are homeless, people who are depressed. I'm doing a project now working with suicide survivors as well. So it's a lot where in my life and in my world, I've seen a lot of contriving of poverty, a lot of contriving of economic disadvantage, and a lot of the things I think about and the strategies that I like to think about and implement is really, how do we kind of balance the scales out here a little bit? How do we start to see each other as equal partners? How do we honor each other for the wisdom and the knowledge that we all have to share? And how do we create the numerical system to better reflect that?
Okay, so you're a kind of an anarchist too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting because we both kind of felt that way, like there's something not quite right here.
Yes.
Things are not in balance. What is it? And around about the same time, we seem to hit upon ding. I think it's something to do with the money system
Hmm.
that is the thing that may have the most impact if we could just get to the bottom of exactly what it is, and
Hmm.
then we could start to look at, so now we know the nature of the beast, let's
Hmm.
try to change that in some way.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, so the timing was very interesting, wasn't it?
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, I've been reading a lot of your work, watching a lot of the videos, and yeah, you're kind of like in the Zeitgeist movie that presented it very well. There's something wrong with the fact that it's legalized usury. There's the the student debt, the mortgage debt, all of this corporate debt that's being amassed. There's something not quite right about that, and there's something that needs to be looked at, something that needs to be looked at bravely, and
Yeah.
then
Who
we
do
just
we
try.
owe all this money to? Why do we keep going bombing people in the Middle East? You
Hmm.
know, there's got to be something there.
Yeah.
So let's think about some of the general principles,
Hmm.
because you mentioned one that is kind of growing debt. And so we
Hmm.
both understand how money is debt. And
Hmm. Yes, it is.
I've just done a short PowerPoint presentation that I just showed to my family
Oh,
yesterday.
wow.
So,
Hmm.
what do you think about this? Because I'm thinking to take it out into the community.
Hmm.
And I'm not kidding you, they were totally shocked by the things.
Yeah.
It's like, look at the money, what does it say? I promise to pay the bearer. And
Hmm.
they were like, oh my God, I thought I knew what credit was. I thought I knew what debit was.
Yeah.
People don't kind of know. They don't know what they don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the deeper you go, the more mysterious it gets too, to the point that we're not even seen as human beings. We're just seen as we're actually seen as people who are legally dead. I mean, you think of the word corporation, corp, like the body, we're entities that are there to serve, and we're not even looked at as people who are alive and viable citizens. That's the thing
Yeah.
about it.
Oh, that sounds a
There's
bit creepy the way you put that.
it is
But
creepy, yeah,
yeah,
and
so the whole straw man thing,
yeah,
which is
absolutely.
kind of going into it really deep. But today, I think we
Hmm.
ought to keep it a little bit light, because
I think that's great.
I want to draw people in from the community who can kind of see that what
Hmm.
we're trying to do is say money is a it's a kind of energy that flows. Well, it should be an energy that flows. At the moment it isn't. It's an energy that people try to grab and take hold of and hoard. But if it
Absolutely.
were an energy and it flowed through the systems in our community, it could do so much good. It could provide things that people need, and it
Hmm.
could help to educate us and train us in skills that we need in our communities.
Hmm.
So this is the kind of, it's a puzzle that we're both pondering at the moment.
Yes,
Is
it
how
is.
can we get that to happen? So can you tell me some of the things that you found in your research
Hmm.
that you've been doing around that?
Oh, certainly, certainly. Well, for the most part, just still being, in my own life as well, working for a corporation. There's a lot of, and it's mostly unconscious. There's a lot of the creation of dysfunctional relationships. So when you think of like a hierarchy, you think of that pyramid structure where, there's more knowledge and more secrets that are closer to the top of that pyramid. And what that is intended to do is it's intended to create feelings of inadequacy. It's intended to keep people from not communicating as effectively. So what it does is it contrives more problems than it does intending to solve problems.
People don't
So
get to see the whole picture because they only see a part of it. So it's very fragmented as well as being hierarchical.
absolutely, absolutely, yes. And so a lot of my work and my research is observing the relationships, especially in a business setting, how competition starts to contrive these dysfunctional relationships, where it creates more problems than it solves. And I think for most of us, for the 99% of us who are right in the thick of it, I don't think that's conscious, but I do think that it's very conscious and very deliberate by the ones who run the businesses, by the ones who create the bylaws for the businesses.
So that's
Um,
very interesting as a concept, because what you're saying is it's very important for whoever is setting the framework out
yes.
to be
Hmm.
coming from the right spiritual, heart centered place, to have
Hmm.
the right intentions and to have the right ethos. It's
Hmm.
not just a matter of maybe nuts and bolts and technical kind of wheels going round.
Absolutely. Well, because at the top, it's about profit, generating profit, rather than creating better livelihoods.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a family member who came into leading a business, a chain of businesses, and his mentor, the one who kind of groomed him for that position, told him, never compliment people, because if you compliment people, they're going to want more money. So that's kind of the, you know, so that's the kind of thing where that self-esteem is sabotaged, and that kind of pulls the curtain back a little bit to seeing, self-esteem is something that's not encouraged in a competitive corporate setting. And that's something that oh,
Mm.
let's look into that a little bit now. Why is that encouraged? And
Yes, and what that means is that people aren't seen, are they? They're not seen for being
exactly.
who they are. They're not seen for the gifts that they have to offer, the
Hmm.
skills and the kind of understanding that they can contribute,
Hmm. Absolutely.
helping, whatever it may be. there. So I think there's a general consensus that GDP, which is the current measure of how the economy is doing, gross national product, is a terrible measure.
Absolutely.
Because it only measures how much you're producing and the profit that that's making. So it's terrible for the earth that we're living on, for the planet. And it means that people are abused and taken advantage of.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Gross national happiness is, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, there's a great series on Netflix right now called Dirty Money, and a great illustration of that, what you're describing there, especially about profitability not being a reflection of happiness. One of the episodes focuses on the big pharma company Valiant, where it was exposed that they were becoming very successful, or their CEOs were becoming very successful by purchasing other companies, cutting out the research budget completely, and just jacking up the prices of the drugs, of the drugs that people needed to stay alive. So in essence, they're holding a gun to people's heads and charging $50,000-$60,000 for medication that's keeping them alive. At the same time, cutting the budget of the scientists and the physicians who are responsible for improving the product, for improving the drugs.
Yeah.
And so that kind of tells you right there where all of this is going. We're not seeing any of this. It's not bettering our lives, but it's creating more numbers that somebody else owns and has access to. But we're still kind of shut out and marginalized. In fact, that's part of the strategy of keeping a power regime in power, is marginalizing a population through technique like that, so that wisdom and intelligence is kind of kept, dormant. So
it makes a kind of mockery of people when they're talking about inequalities and tackling inequalities, because they don't actually understand what's happening. They don't understand the kind of dynamics that are behind money and how it's creating these inequalities, and it not only creating them, it's kind of compounding them, and and they're working. It's getting worse.
Yes,
is what we're saying, and it's going to get worse until we actually stop and study the dynamics behind it, and get to understand some of the terms like, fiat money, or ISDS, or fractional reserve banking.
Yes.
These things. When I did the presentation yesterday, nobody knew what any of those terms were. So
really, wow.
No, they didn't.
Now, what was this presentation, Parmjit? Where was it, and what were more of the topics that you tackled?
It was basically laying out some of the material in the report that that guide to resilient communities. I think I sent one over to you, just laying out. Well, this is what abundance is. It's to do with skills that people have as individuals, and as much as it is to do with the physical resources in the community, and that you can make your own rules, putting those both in the equation, that you don't have to follow the rules that we've got at the moment.
Right.
So it's just a 20-slide kind of set of messages that lay the groundwork for that. And the idea is that I will go and just give that presentation out in the community, so that people get to know what they don't know, really. It's not to really explain it, because then that's quite an in-depth kind of undertaking to do.
Absolutely. Have you made a recording like this, or something that you can present virtually on the computer of that presentation?
I haven't yet. No, it's quite new. Okay. Yesterday was my first run through, but yeah, that would be a good idea. And I think this kind of conversation would be quite useful in drawing people in to kind of think, what is it that we don't know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing too. What a lot of, I mean, we see the news, we see what's going on in the media, and we get angry, that there's so much war. Um, you can look at the numbers and you can see how that kind of suppression of knowledge can be seen in the numbers. For instance, our United States national budget, and this is not even addressing FASB 56 at all, but what's disclosed is almost half of our budget is military. Less than 10% of that is education. So it kind of shows you where the invested interest, where the energy is being focused on, in creating conflict over creating solutions. So that's something where if people start to do the research and start to look at, the numbers,
Mm.
look at the numbers will tell you, well, where is the focus? Well, I can tell you the focus, is 10 times more on conflict than it is on conflict resolution.
Yeah. So it's no wonder really that we've got so many wars and so much poverty. I was going to keep this till the end, but I'm going to show it now
Yeah,
because
sure, go ahead.
you told me about this.
Yeah. Yep. FASB 56.
Go on then, you explain about that.
Absolutely. And my understanding of it is still very new. I was recently just introduced to it, maybe about a month or two ago. But for those listening, look into the work of a woman named Catherine Austin Fitts. So this FASB 56 is really the accounting procedures that pretty much say the government does not have to disclose, what it's spending on or how much it's spending. So there's all kinds of wording, all kinds of legal wording that they hide behind that says, for the most part, we can spend whatever we want on whatever we want, and we don't have to disclose it or tell you. The bottom line is we in the United States think of our national debt being around 21, 22 trillion. If all of this was disclosed and all of this hidden money were found, estimates actually put it closer to $50 trillion. So if people want to wonder why it seems, the gap between the wealthy and why poverty seems to be so abundant, why people have to take two jobs just to make ends meet, but the economy is great, the economy is booming, what's the problem? Well, the problem is, we're actually $50 trillion in debt because corporations keep buying up their own stock again, forcing the prices to go up. And those of us who are not privileged enough to be in those circles, we're the ones who are bearing that $50 trillion debt by, by via homelessness, via having to work 3 jobs that, don't even pay minimum wage, not having, not being able to start a business because small businesses are crushed. I have reason to believe, and I'd love to bring more people into this conversation in the future, but I have reason to believe that if you're not really part of creating conflict, if you're not really part of a lot of these debt scams, you're not going to get any help from people.
Yeah, if an arms manufacturer, goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're doing something legitimate and you're genuinely trying to help people, the current system is set up to hurt you, is set up to crush those efforts. So FASB 56 is really the calling attention to the fact that, hey, we're not being told the truth. There's
control at all in any way, shape or form. Okay, so I think that's a good lead into, so what can we do? What are some of the solutions?
Absolutely.
So you've done quite a bit of research. Tell me.
It feels like a lifetime of research, aren't it, really? Like a lifetime of research. Well, as in business school and in investments, one of the stories or one of the examples that are usually given to us is understanding compounded interest and how it works. The teacher, my economics teacher, when opening up the class, he would ask us, okay, I'm going to hire you to, I'm going to hire you to be my financial advisor. And I'm going to give you a choice of one of two salary arrangements. I'll pay you $100,000 right up front. You be my advisor for the year, and that's the flat rate. Or I will give you $1 today, and I will have that dollar double every day for 20 days, and that will be your salary, salary for the entire year.
So who's giving who this dollar?
Okay, so the
student's
teachers,
giving it to the tutor.
example, yep, I'm paying you to do a job for me. Whether it be
whatever it is.
Financial advice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll give you $100,000 right now for you to basically be at my beck and call for the entire year. Or I'll pay you $1 today, and I'll double that every day for the next 20 days, and that will be your salary for the entire year.
But if you're giving it to me, how can you double it?
What's that?
If you're giving the dollar to me, how can you double it?
How can I double it? Well, I have.
You're giving it to me.
Yep, I have unlimited reserves to give you. So, so I'm paying you to do a job. Let's say I have, maybe $10 million in reserves, to pay you to do a job. Okay, would you take the $100,000 flat rate right away, or would you take the $1 doubled for 20 days?
Are you going to give me the $1 now or after 20 days?
No, I'll give you the $1 today, and I'll give you $2 tomorrow, and then I'll give you double. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ah. Uh-huh.
Yep. So, and the students would think about it and pontificate over it, after about 5 or 10 minutes, people would realize, oh, the $1 doubled for 20 days is $1 million. Is $1.048 million. So that is the kind of mentality that is used on us in the fractional reserve system to create debt. But when we change the psychology of our partnerships, where we start to question, how accounting procedures are done, when we start to question our own value, even what we have to offer, it's very easy to start to make that same compounded strategy work to literally create that kind of partnership where that $1 doubles. The goal that I have for reverse market mechanics is helping everybody to double that every month by giving an affordable service to people.
Okay, so the theory of it, as I understand, is that the fractional reserve system at the moment, it's kind of like a pyramid, the way that you're describing it, isn't it? Because you start with the $1, you double it, you double it, you double it. Yeah. The moment the fractional reserve system is doing that with the economy in order to create debt.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying is that you can flip it over, so that system is actually
you can reverse
something that's positive, of inherent value, and so you're creating abundance rather than debt.
Right. The drive for profit is actually the creation of debt, and because most people are so competitive minded, it's difficult to see that. All they see is profit is good for me. But what it does is, as you drive profit and you're borrowing more money, and the fractional reserve system will lend out 10 times more than it actually has in reserves. And even what they have in reserve is just made up and not really based or underwritten by actual assets.
Fiat money.
Yeah, exactly. The fiat money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So debt flows down, and power flows up and becomes centralized. But if you change the nature of the relationships to equal partnerships, where things are more about education, more about openness, more about disclosing some of this information, what happens is it reverses that, and you create an economy based on reallocation and decentralization rather than centralization and debt creation.
Would it work equally for a service-based industry, kind of education and training, as much as somewhere where you're producing something?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the reason why we're in this debt scam at the moment is because human value services and educations are way undervalued. And that's done mostly by psychological tactics, by social engineering, where material goods are, are pretty much exploited. And we have the technology, we have the human resources to figure out, how to create healthy food and distribute it, to everybody. We have the means to improve, to go towards more of a green, more of a green economy. But because of the psychological relationships, the dynamic of that, the suppression of services and education, that is really, not only the solution, but it's also, it's also the means to get there.
So you would actually start to implement the idea around training and education.
Absolutely. All about
can you tell me, can you go through how it would work in practice?
Absolutely. Well, everybody has something of value to teach. Unfortunately, we're just in a system where, especially in a corporate hierarchy, they're taught to suppress that self-worth, to suppress that developing of that knowledge. So what we do is, we focus on the opposite of what corporations are trying to attain, which is big audiences, go big or go home, all of the, develop something that's going to, be big. No, that we're losing our humanity, in going big or going home.
Yeah, we don't know who the people are behind most of these big businesses.
Exactly. And what it does is it suppresses those interpersonal relationships, which are the foundation of an educational system, of mentorship, of all of that, of equal partnerships even. So in order to make that doubling compounded effect work, we have to start now focusing on our deeper relationships, our more meaningful relationships. So, a lot of our education system is flawed because it's one teacher teaching 30 students who learn things from completely different ways. They have different learning styles, they have different interests, they have different emotional levels of tolerance. And it's the kind of thing where it's ineffective because, the energy is scattered. But when you bring it back to those one-on-one relationships, the small group relationships, changing even the dynamics of the conversation to more asking probing questions, being aware of the emotional content of what is being taught or what the services that are being given, you start to create more meaningful relationships. And when those are sanctified, then that more of that knowledge can be accessed in flipping the pyramid, as we say, flipping the pyramid of control. Because when you dilute those relationships, for trying to get big audiences or trying to regurgitate a concept that might be antiquated, it hurts the relationship. It creates what I call the dysfunctional relationships, which create the compartmentalization in the big pyramid.
Universities are keeping on with that model as we speak. So the way that they're even teaching economics is an outdated model that doesn't actually apply, and it's not working.
Right. And that's the thing. They continue to regurgitate that model, and it continues to escalate the debt crisis.
I still don't, it sounds wonderful, and I get you about the small groups and the attention to the individual and kind of the emotional side of it. That's going to really help learning, understanding your student and having that good relationship. I'm still not getting how the money flow is kind of working behind that process.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's say you have your presentation, Parmjit. Okay. And you create this presentation, and you let us know what it is that we're learning, what it is that we don't know. You present this presentation, And, let's say, you have maybe 10 people who are interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you ask them, if you've got something out of this, consider making a donation of anywhere from $2 to $5.
Mm-hmm.
You take, from that pool of donations, you take $20 of it and you put it in an account, and you encourage two people to do the same, to present something that they're passionate about, something that they're learning, something that they're growing, and they do the
Would
same
it
thing.
would it be what they've learned from me, or would it be something that's coming from them that they want to teach? Or
It can be either. It's
okay,
all based on diversity. It's all based on
okay,
diversity. So, I might learn, something from you, and I might turn around and teach, teach something based on what you had presented, or I might teach something completely different, something else that I'm passionate about, like how theater helps the suicidal. You
yeah. Or
know,
you could mix and match.
yeah, absolutely. So diversity is really the key to decentralization.
Okay.
So two people are inspired to do the same, and they present that. They present a free lesson. And they ask for donations to raise this, what I call a fractal. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and they put it into a reserve as well. So
To the same reserve or a different reserve?
it's the same reserve. Mhm.
Okay.
So where the money flows, and where this starts to develop this idea of compounded interest to reverse the debt scam, is helping people to understand that what they have has power, has merit, and should inspire two other people to take initiative and share what they have to share. Again, the goal is not to become a marketing success, or to become a success in terms of media exposure. It's by deepening the relationships of the people who do understand and who do resonate, and they can reach out to others, and they might find a different way of presenting the same material, but they might do it in a different way, where their teaching style is different, that they can help somebody else understand it who learns from a different method. So the idea is to create teachers, is to create service providers who encourage other service providers, so that as that doubles, now, when we think in terms of that dollar doubling, even when it reaches $1 million, that doesn't leave a dent in the debt crisis. But when you're talking a million people generating $1 million worth of services, which is getting into the trillions, that's when you start to see a whole psychological shift. And that's where I kind of call it making ripples in the pyramid. So where, at the top, the centralized pyramid, is controlling things through compartmentalization, through hiding, suppressing information. The rest of us here, we create expanding ripples out in the existing pyramid structure, which dissolves it. Because that compounded interest now is being sourced from different positions within that pyramid by the subordinates.
Okay. And so you're using fiat money as a
Mhm.
tool here.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of thing where, because of the creation of fiat money, it's a psychological tool. What it is it creates, it creates fear, it creates anger, it creates antagonism. You can turn that same fiat money on top of the structure, so that when everybody is starting to be recognized as equal, as far as in terms of financial means, what that does is it becomes more of a measuring tool than it is a technique for control. And I believe that's the half step to what the Venus Project calls a resource-based economy.
Mm.
So we need to be able to change the psychological dynamics before we can consider something like that kind of a model, like an open access economy or a resource-based economy.
Okay. So there are two things. That's a really interesting idea. I can see it happening already, kind of in very random, kind of a little bit over here in kind of
Mhm.
bits. With,
Yep.
for example, people's artwork, or there's a cafe in Brixton that kind of says, pay what you want to pay, but it
Mm.
hasn't really been systemized. And I think
Right.
whatever the idea is that we want to use to change the engine, it needs to be something that is
Mhm.
happening regularly within a supportive system, so that it
Yeah.
can actually create some kind of impact.
And I'll say all of those ideas, Parmjit, everything, is all necessary, is all needed. Yeah, really, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there too. What I think is just needed now is a space for all of those ideas now to come together, and have the space, have the opportunity to teach us, about what their method is, and then that's how you create the systemic, that how you create the system, where we're synergizing with each other.
Okay. So
Yeah.
a
Mhm.
phrase has just popped into my mind as you were
Mhm.
talking,
Mhm.
which is ideas factory.
Mhm.
It's not one I created. It's just popped into my mind because I think I heard it at a disability awareness meeting I went to recently.
Mhm. Oh wow.
What it's made me think, and it's a fantastic group. This group,
Mhm.
it's doing all the kind of things that you're talking about, consulting in small groups, and
Mhm.
being having a flat hierarchical structure and so on. They're a wonderful group. So the thing that is coming to me is that whole field of confidence, mindfulness, listening, disability awareness is
Mhm.
something that would be a very good kind of kernel, like a kind of to lay the foundation,
Mhm.
because then once you get those things in abundance, and,
Mhm.
and you kind of get an engine that's pushing that out within
Mhm.
the community, then whatever else it's going to produce will be something that will have that energy of good in it.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, an idea factory is a great idea because that's really what it's about. It's about valuing diversity.
Mm.
Again, whether you're just beginning to learn something or whether you've been doing something for 20 years and have created a mastery around it, what you have to offer has value. Especially people who are dealing with disabilities. They're the ones that, like, my son, he has a syndrome, and it's a very rare syndrome, and I'm watching him kind of develop his mind, knowing what little I do know about this. But I see him as teaching me about what he's going through, and he's only 2 years old. So it's the kind of thing where if we value that diversity, if we value what everyone else is giving, is able to give, that's how you create decentralization. That is how you create decentralization. And even if an idea changes, or even if an idea is not very clear at the moment, you can generate financial energy, you can create financial money just by developing the idea. That's part of the problem as well too. There's so much emphasis on product over process, but
Mm.
the process can be infinitely more valuable than what CEO, or what CEO determines subjectively has value. The
Excuse me
process
a minute.
has. Yeah.
Okay, see you later. Okay, sorry, just
So
got
the
interrupted.
process, yeah, so the process has infinite value, and that's something we need to start to consider as well
Absolutely, because
in
it's
an idea
the
factory.
value of creating a relationship, and nurturing relationships, and trust,
Absolutely.
of great value in the whole process
Yep.
of creating an economy that's working.
Yep. You get it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I'm not that's very, very exciting in terms of, yeah, let's see if we can introduce that into the mix that I'm going to be trying to put together in Coventry.
Hmm.
Um, uh, there are things around decision making, which
Yes.
again, I'm going to talk to somebody called Pedro later today.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hoping that he's going to have some ideas around participative decision making, because
Okay.
you've got this reserve of money. It's like, what kind of tools could we learn about to make the decisions about
Hmm.
where they should go?
Hmm.
But that's kind of a nice problem.
Hmm. Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
getting the
Hmm.
money in the first place that's kind of the really sticky part of the problem.
Hmm.
And then the other thing is kind of maybe to do with time scale and changing, having a paradigm that's maybe a little bit more mature, is
Yes.
around when does training become formal and rubber stamped, in the sense that you are now a nurse, or you are now a carer, or whatever other functions that we have,
Hmm.
doctor.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Hmm.
coming up with medical ones at the moment for some reason, but there are lots of kind of professions out there. So
Yes.
at what point, an economist maybe, at what point can you say, I am now sufficiently knowledgeable
Hmm.
to say I'm an economist? At the
Hmm.
moment, I would argue that you go put yourself through university,
Yeah.
not in a position to really say that. So
Hmm.
who's going to decide? And so there's that kind of
Yeah.
thing going
I
around.
would say I think I think there's a big need right now for self-initiative, the ability to be able to identify what your own goals are and how to measure those goals. Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where I think part of the issue, part of the problem is that we're looking for that validation, from an expert outside of us that's looking for us to conform to something. And it's the kind of thing where validation is important. We do need those kind of relationships, where somebody who's been through it can help validate us. But there also comes a need for being able to set goals and effectively achieve long-term goals. I think that's part of the issue of this whole social engineering effort, is that one, it distracts us, it pulls us in different directions from focusing on attaining long-term goals. Um, so I think someone can say they are an expert or they are competent in something is after they have set a long-term goal, say a year or two, and they're able to tell the story of how they were effective, along that journey. A part of the work I do also is helping people understand their own hero's journey, their own um, psychological path from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence. And that's the whole path of what Joseph Campbell would call the hero's journey. It's in the you know the relationship between the unconscious and the conscious mind, where you set this long-term goal and you go through this emotional journey to gain confidence and competence along the way. So I almost feel like the story that you're able to tell after coming through that journey is the validation process. It really is, because you set out to do something that you can measure in time and space. Like an economist, is his function is to analyze financial patterns and to help people make money. A doctor, her purpose, her goal is to treat a disease and maybe reverse the effects or to heal. that's a tangible, measurable goal, that displays competency. So I think it comes a time where we need to discuss with each other in a collaborative, not a competitive fashion, but a collaborative fashion, what the individual's tangible goals are as measured by time and space. And then looking at those long-term goals, supporting each other in those long-term goals to see, were they effective? Was the goal attained? And that is, that is something that creates that competence, I think, that we're talking about.
Okay, that's really helpful to hear. So I think there's some kind of relationship between how open somebody is to information outside of the mainstream norm, because what I find is the more people have been subject to kind of education or the political system,
Yeah.
the less they are ready to tear themselves, to kind of tear themselves away, or even step back and look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's going to be a possible hurdle. But
yeah. And to look back at that process, that evaluation process, and looking at it from a standpoint of compassion too. We're so indoctrinated into criticizing ourselves and to tearing apart, what got us to where we were, that, sometimes we forget to look at, what we've done from a compassionate point of view, how we've learned to put things together. So, yeah.
Yeah. And we're so used to seeing ourselves in boxes of, I'm a doctor, or I'm, of this persuasion politically or religiously.
Absolutely, because there's always somebody who's feeling insecure, who's going to say, stick to what you know. And that's how we keep ourselves in those boxes. That's how we keep ourselves from growing. But again, that's the contriving of dysfunctional relationships. Now let's contrive functional relationships now, compassionate relationships.
Yes, and if you can focus, it comes back to being heart-centered. If you can focus on the compassion, the kind of purpose, the reason why you want to be doing whatever you're doing.
Absolutely.
And if you have a sense of belonging where you are within your political party or within your religion or your culture, you can still step out enough to contribute to that whole kind of hero's journey of our community kind of improving itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, wow. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey talking to you.
Oh, thank you.
I've just written down CRB check because one of the projects, one of the kind of pieces of volunteering I do is within a school, primary school. And I haven't got through their CRB check because they need so many little bits of documents. I've got 2 out of the 3 because they've got 3 columns. So I've got passport, then I've got the bank statement, and then I need a 3rd one. And, I don't happen to have anything in that column.
Yeah, gotcha. Yes.
So it's like I'm actually being prevented from going into a school helping, like you're saying, with these small groups of people, children, to improve their literacy or whatever other skills, because I haven't got this one piece of paper.
Wow.
So my sister's teaching there, so she knows I'm me.
You're right.
I'm not some imposter. And it's as though, like, is this little piece of paper really going to prove I'm not going to do anything terrible?
Yeah, and look at it from this perspective too. What is being deprived of those children who can benefit from your wisdom and your caring nature and all of that, because there's something blocking that piece of paper from coming through. So yeah.
Why do you need 3 pieces of paper? What's that going to prove?
Yeah.
So anyway, so there's a lot of things that need looking at, with a really hard kind of lingering glare to think, well, is this really working for us as a community.
Hmm.
And I think that hopefully people will start to drop some of that willingness to just,
Hmm.
go along with something because
Yeah,
it's
it's
always
showing
been.
up. That's I mean that's half of it right there, Parmjit, is just showing up. And that's what a lot of people fail to do. That's what a lot of people are afraid to do. It's there's a lot of critics out there. There are a lot of there are a lot of people who are so conditioned in creating dysfunctional relationships, that showing up is really just half the battle. If you can show up,
Mm.
then um, I think that's the one thing that really requires emphasis now is show up. Don't be afraid to make the commitment. Show up.
And if enough people show up, and if enough people say,
Mhm.
do you know what? Do we really need this whole process of having CRB checks, or is it actually, or SATS testing, or whatever it is? Is
Mhm.
it something that's actually getting in the way of
Mhm.
the progress of our children?
Mhm.
And then maybe the powers that be, if there's enough kind of pressure from the communities to say, this isn't working, we want things to be done like this,
Mhm.
then
Absolutely. I mean,
we,
that right there is a lesson right there. That's a class. That's a component that would be a functional component in an education generated economy. Is going through the process of analyzing and looking at and having those compassionate discussions around something like a CLB check.
so you've got a boxing ring, and on the one hand you've got Mr. Compassion, and on the other
Hmm.
hand you've got Mr.
Critic.
The way things are done at the moment,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it makes it interesting. It always makes it interesting. Yeah, yeah. I'm editing a video right now, Parmjit. I'll send it to you. But one of the things that is emphasized, there's something that there's a presentation I've created called the most meaningful conversation,
Mhm.
and we look in terms of the creativity, the intellect, emotion, and then a manifestation, or actually creating something in time and space, productivity. I think that's the best word for it, productivity. So
Okay.
in the intellect, there's always this Taoistic, dualistic tug of war between the creative and the critical, the disciplined and the undisciplined mind, all of that. And we do a conversation called the question circle, where being able to ask effective questions, especially in a small group, it helps the critical and the creative to work in concert rather than against each other. Where in the question circle, somebody asks a question, like, are CLB checks really necessary, or is that document very necessary? It goes to the next person in the circle. So maybe there's like 4 people in the circle. The next person in the circle is encouraged to just give their answer, not censor themselves, and just kind of explore wherever their train of thought goes. And then when they get to the end of their answer, they kind of sit with it for a moment. Everybody sits with the answer. And then that person spins a new question exploring whatever it is they just said. I like to use the example of, why is the sky blue? Well, someone would make up an answer. It could be creative, it could be scientific, it could be whatever they want, whatever they want. But, well, the sky is blue because it's Santa Claus's favorite color when he's going through, when he's driving his reindeer and all of that. So it's a completely creative answer, but creativity is encouraged. So we all have to step into that world for a moment, and consider the answer. And then they'll come up with a deeper question about that. It's just like, well, you know, um, you know, why do people have the need to believe in Santa Claus? So that's the spin-off question. So then the next person in the circle goes deeper, answers that question, and they'll make up the answer again. They're stepping into that person's world. they'll come up with another question. And these spin-off questions go around the circle maybe once or twice. And then the original person who asks the question, why is the sky blue? Their answer is going to change. And it's because they've been critically thinking and creatively thinking with this group, and they'll come up with a deeper answer. So you can take a serious question, is this documentation really necessary? And it allows the group to both compassionately and critically consider the question and come at it from stepping into each other's worlds for a little bit. And that's how you change the dynamic of the conversation, and you explore the intellect, how the creative and the critical start to work in concert.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. I'd be really grateful if you could send me any kind of tools like that. And let's just have lots of fun using these tools. And I think also let's have lots of fun in trying to drag people out from the desk in their lovely grey suits and ties.
Let's have fun dragging people. I love how you worded that.
Involved in these kind of activities.
Absolutely.
See what comes out from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my final question.
Yep.
Why is the sky blue?
Mm-hmm.
Why is the sky blue?
Oh, wow. Why is the sky blue?
Maybe it's an unfair question. Was that actually a question that you did?
What's that?
Was it a question that you did? So what was the answer that came out?
Oh, wow. We come up with all kinds of answers. It's an improv game. A little more background about myself. I'm an acting teacher. I teach improv as well.
Okay.
So this is kind of like a deeper version of the game Questions Only, where you do a scene, but all you do is ask questions, and you ask, and the questions sometimes get deeper. But yeah, some of the answers are kind of like, well, maybe the sky isn't blue. Maybe you're just interpreting that way, and who's to say what blue is? And then you can get into a whole philosophical discussion about subjectivity and that kind of a thing. But By
the time it comes around again, though, and you ask it the second time, do people more or less have a shared understanding of why it's blue?
Most definitely. Yeah. So that's the important thing, I think, and why I bring that up is that if we can use our intellect to step into other people's worlds for a moment, and we come out of it, our world is changed. That's compassion. That is compassion. So asking, deeper questions, not being afraid to ask the deep questions, and being okay with being asked the deep questions, developing those kinds of emotional awareness, can really start to turn everything around. And that's coming from that heart center. So.
And what kind of frequency?
I'm sorry?
What kind of, how often would you need to do something like that? And what kind of size of group? How long?
I would probably say for that specific exercise, that can take an hour to an hour and a half with 4 to 5 people.
Okay. Wow.
Just that really exercise alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it can. But it really, the conversations are just very eye-opening and very wonderful, and so maybe that's something we could all do in the future. So yeah.
Great. So I've had some really wonderful ideas. I've got to find out a bit about your research, which was why I really wanted to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's been great fun to finally get to talk to you, the man behind all the wonderful posts on Facebook, sites that have been so very wise.
Oh, thank you. Well, the feeling is mutual, Parmjit, and reading and watching your material, I'm very glad and very grateful and appreciative that we had this opportunity to talk.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Keep in touch. Continue sharing ideas and kind of updating each other on what's working and what's going well, so that
absolutely
together we can go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the question that I always ask, at the end, at the beginning, I usually like to ask, okay, what is the intention? And then at the end is what happens next?
Yeah. Mm. Okay. And
Mhm.
what is happening next with you? What are you doing?
Yes, what happens next for me is a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, I'm putting into a documentary film so that I can put visuals to, helping people understand like the idea of fractional reserve banking and, these ripples that we can put in that pyramid structure for, using what we know, our knowledge, our education. So all of these things, in a dialogue like this, some people will understand it, most people will not. So the visual of the documentary film, I find, really, really helps as well. Um, I've written a manuscript and a business plan on how to create a service and education market economy. I'm tweaking that as we speak now. And I'm also creating classes like the question circle and classes around how to create your own class that appeals to all learning styles.
Okay.
So for me, that's what's next, and that's what I'll have available very soon within the next month or two.
Your film will be ready within the next month?
The classes will be ready, and the manuscript will be ready to be read. And I will have portions of the film ready to see. I'll have the entire film probably put together by the end of the
Okay. Well, my intention is to also get out there in the community with the presentation, and I'd like to try out some of the methods that you've mentioned, and try out some of the tools that I'm learning from other people, like Pedro, for example, that I'm going to talk to
year.
later today as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and then we'll keep on updating one another to see where we get to.
Wonderful.
I know there's a solution.
Hmm.
You know there's a solution.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we'll find it.
Yeah. Well, the solution is getting together and talking like this.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. It's
You're
been
welcome,
a real
Parmjit.
pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise. Likewise. We'll be in touch.
Take care.
Okay. You too.
Bye.
Bye bye.